12 November 2023, second part of our conversation. The first part we presented how we formed the intelligence to understand and supply the counterfeit needs, and allowing the request based on codified argument, which is something like this kind of have the complaint made for accusation or accusations already made 2014-2023 by blind eye, association and silence as institutional decision to cap the problem, doing aggression, violation of guarantees to hurt her rights, very intentionally, systematically made, even optimizing the types of aggression and institutional violence, taking all chances of the victims, and by this have improved the annihilation, since you violated the guarantees with no excuse to be, and those guarantees in an area also that can be touched, you perpetrated institutional violence. And if the state has the duty to protect or something like this, but you did the opposite, you perpetrated the criminality at state. You accepted the risk and we charged this. It's codified by this, presentation here as regular architecture with a regular procedure, corrupted and unveiled as criminal purpose. You got charged by this. If happened in Brazil, it's according with the law, and the law not only in Brazil, respecting the constitutional premise in Brazil, because you treason the people as Brazilian and foreigners, affecting the development of mankind as commitment of this republic, and by this the risk allowed the compensation in the same way, especially if he hurt or got so annoyed with this anti-crime effort. We presented yesterday the model to understand the proportion of the criminal activity and satisfy the need to get the lack of will as institutional behavior. The first thing you have offered as exclusive steps is that the lack of will, lenient behavior, or silence is an institutional decision, has a consequence from institution regressed until chairs. We will observe that this proportion as model helped to understand the internal debt in USA, the electoral problem, and now we will observe how this will happen and help to understand the lack of will by the proportion of criminality, indeed goes by the criminal area advancing on regular space, by cultural destruction that will be presented as false records, and is suggested to have more sources as information, especially big data. We offer the database Sigma and the approach to unveil this kind of thing as institutional movement ruled by criminal purpose, sometimes having deeper level as institutional violence, as proved by the behavior made systematically even by silence and charged by this as institutional decision. For instance, in Brazil, by Brazilian peers violating the guarantees in Brazil that can be touched to hurt her rights with no excuse to be made, totally wrong, and requesting to the heads as representative of those institutions, be at the US Embassy and European embassies, with the European Commission to present the reasons by this risk behavior or damage results as consequence of this institutional silence and actions as criminal intent with no excuse to be made. Can be observed that the American people will be protected by the United States, even in Brazil, by the combination of both architectures of security and stability, but not linked with the organized crime the same way on Europe. Europeans will have this protection in Brazil and in Europe, but not linked with the criminality if the architecture has the internal fail, a loss of integrity, not respecting their own guarantees, premises, and regulations, internationally complained, indeed has no honor as country, as system, and it's proved because it's a system of criminality and crimes. We could have that the discretionary debit will be used as excuse to do not satisfy the fixed debt as needed, and the fixed debt will be used as the excuse to do not satisfy the obligation that must be covered by the discretionary use of the as credit. And this in both cases is the self-dealing, the corruption of both arguments by the credit to perpetrate frauds against the obligation required. We observe that the gap as logical gap is a need, can be by the not proper information, by do not have the insertion of the information, or having the fusification of information until things became senseless. Because you can present your relation as debit and credit as personal illicit gains, or supply and demand considering the participation and proportion of piracy items as micro traders, or internal architectures as trade and economy, considering the parallel production of items, services, and this leads to the economic espionage and the fake money, both objects at the counterfeit as piracy scam. In the same way, the parallel use of power goes since you achieve the institutional power in general by the electoral procedures with fraud, sometimes with exploitation of vulnerability as told in France and UK by politicians and the people at the area. It's on social media, you can take a look. The Europeans complain that they lost rights by the exploitation of vulnerability to allow the achievement as power, but in ways sometimes really dubious. As you can observe, the corruption affects the government, the corporations, and the states equally, but they are equally combined as purpose to affect the integrity of them all, and by this proved in Brazil as no commitment with the development of mankind, considering the people hurt in Brazil as Brazilians and foreigners. Since you're not linked with the organized crime, you probably got victimized by this, even having no idea about this, and risk projected at the future covered on present time with records modified about the past. And this is something very intentional. You disrespect the premises as constitutional guarantees to hurt the rights as freedom, privacy, or the protection that you must do. We will observe now that the idea of this model is quite simple. It's offered to the OECD anti-corruption. We will observe that the proportion is, scam on mathematics, quite simple, very ancient, but very effective and simple. We use it down here, theories of 12 years old kid was nothing new, and we, guess what, destroyed this criminal architecture pandemic. Simple. We will have the A plus B as legal result and illicit result in USA. this gives me 100% as result, but this result must be got as something like this. The first control, this is the illicit result in USA, and the proportion. I will understand that is a criminal architecture, at least on business, but with silence about this. If I'm not American, it's associated. In the same way, we will do this on Europe. If I'm half European, Europe probably will not have the same problem, which will be right. Then illegal. You consider that the same groups spread all around will have exponential gains. Solidarity is state and institution proved legitimate, hurting rights in an area that has no excuse, systematically made by Chicago School, not aleatory but intentional. So there remains the loss. The loss goes like this: illicit things on Europe plus illicit things on USA divided by the proportion as total of result USA, total of result on Europe, to understand the, how serious is this proportion, considering the regular result in USA, the regular result on Europe. The same situation here as quotient will give me the situation here if the relation that I will call as beta and the relation I will call as alpha of two poles, beta is higher than alpha, I can understand the criminal activity, at least on business, and dragging institution public on it, are much more relevant as center of interest and institutional decision than have the regular accomplish of this. We can drill down this from beta as illicit result divided beta illicit result divided as America and USA, to understand the areas that is taking advantage of both, and both are all taking advantage of regular area Europe, regular area USA, only goes by their association promiscuous and by villainy between public and corporations, public corruption and corporate corruption in USA and Europe. They will have all gains severed, listed name to dismiss, hearing and prison or other consequence, illicit business closed. Then we will have now a large money as option to be applied and help the business as not offshore business that got legitimacy down by the interest and institutional protection of criminal activity and purpose, even violating rights, doing cultural destruction, covered by fake records, and having no commitment with the development of mankind, once in a while by misusers of power to cover power previously misused and have the continuity this, perpetrating crimes against humanity crimes, and crimes against mankind. crimes against mankind are to what we always observe that they consume supply chain and noticed by biohazard, contamination, annihilation. Humanity crimes is against our condition, as pursuit the happiness or something like this. In general, exploiting the vulnerability and the misery as management, even as electoral groups vulnerable that are institutional decisions or whatever, right? Quite simple. The lack of will goes by the prevalence as behavior at this humble proportion. The model is offered to set the police as better police, neutral area flights with this kind of offenders at this proportion, and officers allowed to kill. Have a great week.